You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. This is Marissa and I'll be taking you through until 5 o'clock this evening. And before I get into the broadcast, just a special cheerio to Rob and Peter who can't be here for the show. And the Doin' Time show, along with many other shows at 3CR, are operating remotely at the moment because of stage 4 restrictions, and indeed the Doin' Time show has provided ongoing coverage in regards to, in particular, COVID-19 and the public health crisis, prisons and police powers. Today on the show we're going to be having a very special broadcast, and it's about protest, repression and the law. And I'm going to be interviewing a few people. First up, we're going to be speaking with Chris Breen from the Refugee Action Collective, who is going to be a speaker at an event organised by Melbourne activist Legal Support. And this is actually a panel discussion that's going to be happening this Thursday, and I'll give you some details later on about that. Basically, Melbourne activist Legal Support is going to be presenting a series of public panels and trainings. And this is because the right to protest has been seriously eroded during COVID-19. Melbourne activist Legal Support is pleased to present a series of online events as a belated part of Law Week 2020 entitled Protest, Repression and the Law. Basically, the year 2020 has seen a surge of civic activity at the same time as governments struggle to enforce lockdowns to prevent COVID transmission. And in Victoria, this tension between the right to protest and the power of the state, particularly during an emergency, have been brought to the fore. Basically, there's an invitation for listeners to join the webinars and community trainings to discuss a right to protest, which is on Thursday the 27th of August, 1 to 2 p.m. Virtual discussion on the right to protest and the Victorian Charter, featuring Dr. Maria O'Sullivan, Monash, Michael Stanton, barrister, and Chris Breen, refugee activist and branch counsellor and teacher. So we'll be speaking with him about that, and we'll have a look at the second event later on, because after that we'll be speaking with Tom Batsaby, who's a defence barrister who had volunteered with Melbourne activist Legal Support and is still volunteering with them. And he's attended several events as a Mel's legal observer, including the IMARC blockade in October last year, where he witnessed significant acts of police violence, and he's presenting a discussion panel with Chris Breen later this week on Thursday as part of a series of Law Week events hosted by Mel's. So we'll be speaking with Tom later on, and for now, let's cross over now to Chris Breen, who will give us some information not only about the event, but also why he will be speaking.
You're listening to Radical Radio 3CR.
What we're dealing with here is a total lack of respect for the law.
Tune in to Done by Law.
An informal and irreverent look at the law. Critical insights and analysis from diverse community perspectives.
Done by Law, 6 p.m. Tuesdays.
And you're back with the Doing Time show. And on the line now, we've got Chris Breen from the Refugee Action Collective. Hello, Chris. Welcome to the program.
Hello, Marissa. Thanks for having me on.
Lovely to have you. Just to clarify your role in the as a Victorian branch councillor, Chris, can you just clarify that for listeners?
The Australian Education Union has a structure which has a branch council of around 100 people. I'm one of the elected representatives on that. There are elections that happen every 2 years. I'm certainly not speaking on behalf of the Australian Education Union.
No. I was just reading out your bio, and I just wanted to clarify that.
It's a rank and file elected union position that has input into union decisions.
Good on you, Chris. Okay, so we obviously need to be extremely careful here the way we proceed, because we have to be careful of contempt of court, because there's a court date coming up for you in August, isn't there? But in fact, we're doing
September 29th now. Yep.
September 29th. So there's no reason why we can't actually talk about that court date later on. Yep. But we'll speak in very general terms. But the Doing Time show has actually done extensive coverage about this situation. And Chris, before we actually get talking about the event that you're going to be involved in, I just wanted to alert listeners to the fact that earlier this year, several people were fined for breaching COVID-19 restrictions whilst protesting, and they were protesting against the serious mistreatment of refugees and asylum seekers in Mantra hotels in Victoria and the heightened risk surrounding COVID-19 for those detained. Would you say that's a fair enough summary?
Yes, there were 30 refugee supporters in a car convoy who were charged, who fined $1,652 each, $50,000 in total. It was complying with the spirit of the legislation. And I wasn't actually at that event. I was charged with incitement for being one of the organisers.
Incitement for being one of the organisers?
Yes.
We'll have to talk about that later. So can you talk a little bit about the evolving climate surrounding protesting under COVID-19 restrictions?
Sure. I mean, that's what the forum you mentioned, and I'm speaking on a lunch break, is about. That's what the forum is about.
Yes.
I think it's increasingly clear that COVID-19 has been used as an excuse to crack down on the right to protest. So in Queensland, I think it was a week ago, we saw there was going to be a protest on Story Bridge for the Kangaroo Point refugees, and the government went to the Supreme Court to try and ban that protest. This is at the same time there'd been no cases for several days in Queensland, and when they're allowed to have 10,000 people at rugby stadiums. So there is, incredible hypocrisy. Similarly, in New South Wales, refugee and Black Lives Matter protests have been banned. And again, there's 5,000, I think it's allowed. In the grand final, the NRL has just asked for permission to go from 10 to 50,000. And in Melbourne, there is the Black Lives Matter protesters here were fined. We were fined. Unions have been fined. The CFMEU has been fined for taking various forms of protest. And I think it's fairly clear now that it's not protest that is the spreader of COVID-19. There's no evidence of any spread from the big Black Lives Matter protests here, nor in the United States is there any evidence that they caused any spike. It's not outdoors. It's not to say there's zero risk, but it's not outdoors. We know it's indoors at close confinement for long periods of time. So it's, places like abattoirs and aged care homes. And, abattoirs in Victoria are staying open. We've seen 200 people with the masked singer staying open, but no form of protest is allowed. And to be able to deal with some of the issues even that COVID-19 throws up, for instance, the ACTU's called for paid pandemic leave for all because we've had an issue with casual workers having to make a choice between income and going to work with symptoms. And how else are we going to win that pandemic leave except through protests and industrial action? So, we think when the marketplace is open, the public square should be open. There should be a right to protest. Every single day, Scott Morrison, Peter Dutton, their voices are not shut down in the media, but protest is one of the ways, well, it's probably the key way that refugees get their voice into the media. There's been protest inside the detention centres, and, we think it's important in whatever way can be safely done to protest not to leave refugees on their own, not to leave them without solidarity.
And can you just talk about the event on Thursday that you're going to be a part of and why you're going?
I'm going because I was asked at one level, but I'm going because I think the right to protest is incredibly important. If you look at the victories that we've had in the refugee movement, not nearly enough, but they wouldn't have been possible without protest. You look at the campaign to get kids off Nauru that did bring kids and families off. It was mass protest. Teachers took industrial action. If you look at the Let Them Stay campaign that stopped baby Asher being sent back to Nauru, again, it was mass protest, a union blockade of the Lady Salento Hospital. So I think there is an incredible importance to the right to protest. And political decisions are being made by our leaders all the time about what they think is essential, what is not essential. These are negotiations with employers. And we can't, I think, surrender the right to protest indefinitely. There are safe, socially distanced ways to protest.
Absolutely there are. And this is what needs to be talked about because often that's not talked about in the media. Can you describe how people can social distance when they're protesting?
Well, there's different ways depending on the circumstances, the laws, the political situation. So our protest, for instance, the Refugee Action one, was a car convoy. Had no more than 2 people per car, only from the same house. People didn't get out of their cars. So it's hard to see how that was any particular threat to safety. The Black Lives Matter protest here, I wasn't involved in that, but they made sure that everybody wore masks. They tried to enforce social distancing. They had hand sanitizer. They called on the state government to help them in that respect. I don't think they got an answer from the state government. But, when Prime Minister Scott Morrison can appear in crowds at an NRL match and thousands are allowed there, to say that protest is the problem is, I think, to be honest, it's ridiculous.
It is absolutely ridiculous. So there's going to be a number of... Go on.
No, I was just going to say, it's been the casualised neoliberal economy here which has led to the outbreaks of COVID-19. We've seen in the quarantine hotels.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, we've seen the poorly paid security guards privatised, subcontracted, working 12-hour shifts, not getting much equipment, working at the the quarantine hotels. It's been very similar conditions in aged care. And again, to address these things, you need protest or industrial action. Interestingly, in publicly owned Victorian nursing aged care centres where there's a nurse-to-patient ratios of 1 to 15, a permanent workforce, there's been hardly any COVID outbreak. And so there does need, even to address, whether it's to address refugee rights or it's to address things to do with the pandemic itself. If you look at somewhere like Belarus at the moment, hundreds of thousands of people protesting in the street against a effective dictator who says that COVID-19 is a psychosis, it doesn't exist. To deal with COVID-19, you need that protest over there. So obviously there's different circumstances in different places. And we're saying here, our protest was to draw attention to the real risk of COVID-19 spreading through like wildfire through detention centres. We know at the Mantra Hotel there's been a guard who's been tested positive to COVID-19. We've seen the outbreak at youth detention in Brisbane, which has seen, young kids locked in solitary in their room. Interestingly now, well, not interestingly, sort of disgracefully, the Morrison government has reopened Christmas Island. But the reason they've done that is to free up space in Perth if they need to move people in case of a COVID-19 outbreak from, Melbourne or Brisbane. Now, that's no solution. The solution is to free people like medical professionals and, advocates have been calling for. But the fact that Morrison government has even acknowledged that this is a risk to refugees is because people have drawn attention to it again and again. The refugees themselves and protesters, particularly in Brisbane, there's been wall-to-wall media coverage of the Kangaroo Point protests. It hasn't been so much down here, but it's because of those protests that coverage wouldn't have happened without the protests. And if the state governments wanted to give us a voice in the media, we can go and have a negotiation, but they're not about to do that.
That's exactly right. And you're absolutely correct, Chris. It is disgraceful that they've opened Christmas Island, and thank you for mentioning that. And also, this is something that, as a radio broadcaster, that I've been saying all along, on air and off air, that COVID-19, particularly in Victoria and now in Queensland as well, has spread because of insecure work and the quarantine, the breaches in quarantine.
Yes, and again, it's something that unions have traditionally used both protest and industrial action to try and deal with those sorts of issues, and to simply avoid that. Daniel Andrews said debate about casualisation can wait. It can't. It's been part of the reason that COVID-19 has been spreading. And so the problem is protest is being cracked down on, but where COVID is actually being spread, there is no action being taken. So we're not getting mass workplace testing. We're not getting workplaces redesigned. We're not getting pandemic leave. We're not getting, nationalised aged care. We're not getting, the properly resourced quarantine, contact tracing. And it's not protest, which is the problem.
And there certainly isn't proper contact tracing, is there?
No, I'm a teacher. I certainly know of people in schools where there have been positive cases, and teachers have talked about contacts not being called for a week. People who are asymptomatic asking to get tested, not being able to.
Chris, it's really great that you've been able to talk about the background to COVID-19 and not only to discuss the right to protest and how that's being eroded, but also looking at the pandemic as a whole and how all the breaches and the lack of resources and the lack of coordination and incompetence, government incompetence, has been highlighted and exposed. So I
think even when cases drop again, and it's not like governments are opening up the right to protest. That's something that's going to have to be won and fought for. You look in Queensland where cases dropped to very, very low or to zero for weeks. The right to protest was still coming under attack. In New South Wales, where there wasn't community transmission, right to protest was still coming under attack. I don't think that people should think that once the pandemic is gone, rights that are taken away are simply handed back to us on a plate.
I'm not going to stay locked in my home forever. Believe me, I'm going back out there to record. I'll wear a mask and I'll bring sanitizer. And if the police have got something to say about that, they can talk to me. Because as a radio broadcaster, I'm not going to just sit here and do interviews and not do any off-site recording. What's the point?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, there are exemptions for the media at the moment. You know, they always say on the news, media doesn't have to wear masks. I don't know if 3CR is covered by those exemptions, but
not sure. I'd have to actually look into that to see if community radio actually. That's an interesting point, actually. It's approximately 4:20, and we're going to be interviewing Tom pretty soon in regards to the whole series of panels that are going to be happening, Tom Battersea. But I'm wondering, are there any final comments, and could you just quickly mention when the event is on, Chris, where you'll be speaking?
The event is it's 1 o'clock this Thursday. If you look for a Right to Protest or Melbourne Activist Legal Support on Facebook, you'll find it. It starts at 1. I won't be there till a little bit after. And for people interested, my court case, the contest mentioned on September 29th, there will be a rally, whether online or otherwise, depending on the current restrictions at the time. And that if you go to the Refugee Action Collective website on Facebook, you can find the details of that event as well. So it's calling to free the refugees and defend the right to protest. And, you know, I should mention that it's been over 7 years now, and refugees held in the Mantra and Kangaroo Point are still detained. These are people who came here for medical treatment. They're vulnerable. There is no reason to, even without COVID, there's no reason to keep them locked up in detention. It is destroying people. It's a crime.
It is a crime, and we look forward. I do encourage listeners to go and participate in this online event, and as well as Chris being a speaker. The event also features Dr. Maria O'Sullivan Monash, Michael Stanton Barrister, as well. And I'll be continuing this discussion with Tom Battersea very soon to discuss the series of panels and perhaps even to talk about the charge of incitement to riot. When's what that means in practice? First of all,
I can say one thing about the incitement charge.
Yes.
Nothing to do with any of the legals. It is a worrying precedent. Like if the charge against the last time incitement was used was against the Odd Study 5 in 1992, and that charge they were found not guilty. If the charge against me is proven, it carries all sorts of implications for climate protests, for union protests. At the moment there's a very narrow window that unions can legally take industrial action. You could imagine if a union called it outside of that, they'd be liable for a charge of incitement. It's a very dangerous precedent.
Absolutely, it is. And when's the court case, and where is it?
So it's a contest mention, which is one of the steps on the way to a full hearing. It's September 29th at the Magistrates Court. We're having a rally at 8:30 a.m. It may be online. The full hearing won't be for some time after that. Hopefully this year, but we'll see.
Chris Breen, keep up the good work, and if people wish to register for the event, they can also go to where's the website here? www.melbactivistlegal.org.au and go to the Get Involved page for upcoming events.
Yeah, and thanks to Mel for putting on the forum. It's very important at this point in time.
It's absolutely crucial. Thanks so much, Chris. Take care.
Thanks for having me on. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM.
We have seen record numbers of protests in Latin America recently, explicitly calling for an appropriate response to the pandemic, alongside the protection of healthcare workers and social and economic welfare for the population. Ecuador, Brazil, Bolivia and Chile have all grown increasingly feeble in their justifications for both a lack of action against coronavirus, as well as their increasingly authoritarian behaviour. Suffice to say, the Latin American right is being undone by its contempt for public healthcare, its contempt for an essential human right. And with their traditional backer, the USA, embroiled in its own pandemic nightmare, the kleptocrats, religious zealots and maniacs leading Latin America's right wing are now on their own, it seems. And the region's people, from all available evidence, are perfectly aware of this fact. And their actions against this public health and political emergency are becoming all the more radical. After all, it is a matter of life and death, as it has always been in Latin America.
You're listening to 3CR Community Radio 855 AM on digital and online. 3CR Radical Radio.
Hi everyone, my name's Robbie Thorpe. I'm with 3CR Community Radio. Every year we have a subscription drive. It's a way of supporting our organisation maintain itself through the year, and we rely on the support of the community. One way to do that is to subscribe and become a member, become part of this organisation itself. Get in contact with 3CR. You can go to the website 3cr.org.au, or you can ring on 9419 8377. 3CR ensures that our voices, Aboriginal voices, are heard on this radio station. So it's a good way of supporting Aboriginal people as well, by becoming a subscriber for 3CR Community Radio.
COVID-19 is a sickness that can spread from person to person. It can be dangerous, especially for our elders or people who are already unwell. We can all help stop the spread in our communities. Cover a cough with the inside of your elbow instead of your hand. Wash your hands with soap for at least 20 seconds after you cough or sneeze. Go to the toilet and before you make any food. Keep away from people who are sick, coughing or sneezing. Avoid going to places where there are lots of people. At this time, it is best to stay at home and away from other people as much as we can. If you're feeling unwell, have a fever, cough or sore throat, or worried about someone else, phone your doctor, clinic or medical service right away for advice. It is important to stay connected and strong as a community and keep our mob safe. Visit health.gov.au or your local health service for more information.
Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
A 3CR supporter.
And you're back with the Doing Time show. And we're going to be speaking presently with Tom Battersea, who is a defence barrister who had volunteered with Melbourne Activist Legal Support. He has attended several events as a Mel's legal observer, including the IMARC blockade in October last year, where he witnessed significant acts of police violence. He's presenting a discussion panel with Chris Breen later this week as part of a series of Law Week events hosted by Mel's. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Marisa. Thanks for having me on.
It's lovely to have you. Tom, we were just speaking with Chris about a range of issues, in particular in regards to the right to protest and looking at some of the online events that are coming up. Could you just talk to us about what Mel's is and why Mel's has organised these events?
Absolutely. So Mel's is sort of a collective, I suppose. It's Melbourne Activist Legal Support. And basically what we are is a small-ish organisation that basically is dedicated to the right to preserving those political spaces where people can take a stand, whether it's being a public demonstration, where they're sort of peaceful, non-violent sort of gathering of people in public spaces, or other avenues. So we do a number of things. We provide, probably we're best known for the pink vests that some of your listeners may have seen at protests. So we go along to events where we're invited to observe, I suppose, interactions between police, organisers and other groups that may be present. We also often provide follow-up reports in relation to those events where we make statements of concern if we've seen particular behaviour that we think is inappropriate, particularly from police. And we also have broader reports. So we prepared or published a fairly detailed report regarding the hard lockdown at the tower blocks in Flemington and North Melbourne recently.
Oh, when there were lockdowns in the towers, what was the role of Mel's for that?
Yes, so we had observers present there, and we were able to provide a report following that lockdown, describing, I suppose, what was observed by Mel's in terms of which services were interacting. I think there were about 500 police deployed there, but essentially what you had was a situation where all of those residents in the towers were given no notice that they were suddenly under house arrest, and certainly there are policy reasons, I suppose, why the state government thought they had to do that, but Mel's really, I suppose, took issue with how that was enforced in terms of deploying 500 police to those towers, which have a long history of themselves of being over-policed, and also the way that particular services were able to function to support those residents during the lockdown, which was, I suppose, what was put in place was not effective, and residents were denied medication or food, culturally appropriate food, those sorts of issues. So that report's been published on our website and is available to anyone who wishes to read it.
And what is the website?
It's called, the website is melbactivistlegal.org.au. So if anyone Googles Melbourne Activist Legal Support, it should come up as the first result. We're certainly an open organisation, so any listeners who might be interested, certainly you're invited to look at our website and some publications, but certainly we also have monthly meetings that are open for anyone wishing to get involved. One thing that we do, I should have said that is really integral is sort of training, I suppose. So training in terms of attendees at public demonstrations to know what rights they have when interacting with police, what rights they have as members of the community here. We offer trainings for people who wish to be legal observers, so sort of don the pink vest, hold a camera, observe police, Victoria Police interacting with members of the public or other groups that may be present, such as far-right provocateurs and so on. So we hold open trainings for people who wish to do that as well. And then more advanced trainings to coordinate those teams who are providing that support on the day of an event.
Thank you so much for giving listeners a very concise explanation, and you're a volunteer with Mel's.
Yeah, that's right. We're all volunteers. We have a number of supporters through a recurring funding, so we're certainly very grateful for some of the support that we've got from the community. And the feedback we often have from organisers is that our presence at those events is often helpful. Sometimes we'll be present, we'll get questions from people who are protesting saying basic things like, am I allowed to take photographs of police? Am I allowed to ask them their names? Questions about what police powers are in terms of moving them on. Some of the really basic work we do, I suppose, is just helping people understand that they do have a right to protest. So some people are worried that it'll put their jobs at risk, put their livelihoods at risk if they get out there and they're marching in the streets, and they think they'll be locked up and lose their rights, I suppose, they ordinarily enjoy as citizens. So we just offer very basic, I suppose, information about that right to peaceful assembly, which can be empowering for some groups who have concerns. One of the recent trainings we did that was really positive was with an organisation called the Muslim Legal Network, which has a lot of young law students who are members. and many of the members had witnessed, I suppose, racialised policing, where they'd felt that they'd been approached because of the way they look, or many of the members had concerns, particularly given what they were studying, that if they were to attend a protest, many of them wanted to attend the Black Lives Matter rally held earlier this year, but felt like they might be putting their future career at risk by doing so if they were arrested, particularly given the health directions that were in force. So we were able to just have a very general session about that being a human right, and certainly a right that's enshrined in Victoria. And then also, I suppose, an awareness that often when you're dealing with police, it's a very fluid situation and it's very difficult to control, and sort of just a general discussion of how people might try and defuse those interactions while still being aware of what rights they have.
And the Charter of Human Rights would definitely be relevant here, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So we're really excited to have Chris Breen speaking on Thursday for this online event. So he's fantastic and certainly is aware of the rights he has and exercises those to good effect. But we also have, I suppose, a more legalese or legalistic perspective. We've got Dr. Maria O'Sullivan, who's an academic at Monash University, and she's a senior lecturer, and she is the author of a number of international and national publications on the subjects of human rights, public law, and refugee law. And we also have a barrister, Michael Stanton, who works with Liberty Victoria, and he's appeared in a number of notable cases in the Supreme Court here, and has a master's in human rights law. So I guess we try and really bridge the theory between those sort of more technical sides of what rights we have on paper, and then what rights we have in reality when you've been stopped by an officer who tells you that you're placing the community at risk by driving a car with toilet paper to people who need it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And so this event will be this Thursday, the 27th of August?
That's right, at 1 p.m. There's an Eventbrite page that has been sent around. There's probably the easiest way if people are listening out there and they're interested in attending. We've got a Facebook page. We're still on Facebook. It's an easy way to organise, I suppose. And there's a Facebook event that they can find if they search for the Melbourne Activist Legal Support page. That should come up, and there's a link to the Eventbrite page where they can register their details. We'll send out a Zoom invite, and basically the same as you, Marisa, I'm going to just try and get people like Chris and Michael and Maria to talk about those issues,
yes.
And sort of, I guess, try and get across to any participants who are interested, what their rights are and how those sort of layers of legislation and police powers interact, particularly during this very weird time of COVID-19.
It is very weird indeed. And I was just talking to Chris previous to you about COVID-19 and about how the public health regulations are really giving police more impetus, if you like, to charge people during protests.
Mm. Yeah, it's a very weird time. It's a state of emergency, and we know historically how state power can be abused during those sort of exceptional times. Certainly, Mal's takes no issue with the need for a strong health response. I think most people would accept that, at this point, we depend on the government to sort of look after our welfare to some extent. But I guess it's how you do that and what sort of tools you use. And we've seen a very, I suppose, police-focused response to the pandemic, where it's really been those enforcements, those infringements, and people like Chris have sort of been made an example of charges like incitement, which is a very it's a strange charge for police to use, saying it's the kind of charge you use when someone's organising a terrorist event or something like that. Certainly not a peaceful protest just to express care to a marginalised group. So it's very odd to see Victoria Police take that approach, and it's hard to know if that's something, I suppose, where that approach originates, if it's the state government thinking that this is how you communicate with people, or if it's delegation of responsibility to a police force that doesn't quite know how to communicate or interact in a compassionate and helpful manner with the community.
So the charge of incitement, can you just let listeners know what that means? Basically, Chris was taken out, was raided, and then he was arrested even before the protest began and taken to the police station, held there for many hours, and his computer was seized. So with the incitement charge, what does that actually mean?
So what that means is that you're inciting other people to commit an offence. So police are basically saying that you can have committed an offence by encouraging someone to commit an offence. So there are sort of different elements to the charge, but I guess what they're alleging is, they've got to be able to prove that the actions of one person incited another to commit an offence. And in this case, they'd say, well, that's the offence of breaching the chief health officer's directions. And they have to then prove that the person who's incited the other intended for them to go out and do it. So there are so many things that could be covered by this offence. It's a very nebulous sort of charge that could cover all sorts of conversations that might happen ordinarily. I suppose what the police will rely on is a digital trail or organisational trail where someone's, even if you created a Facebook event, they might say, oh, well, that's inciting people to do this. But I understand in Chris's case that police have gone out, raided his home, seized his son's computer and so on, which seems like a very strange thing to do to someone who's organising a peaceful protest, to express care and concern for a marginalised group. It's hard to understand what the rationale would have been at an operational level for that, and to some extent it's kind of characteristic of what we often see, which is really an unhelpful and inappropriate response to somebody's civil rights, I suppose, in terms of expressing concern as a citizen. So I'm not sure, and I don't know what Chris Breen will do in relation to his charges, and I'm not sure if he'd even want to talk about it publicly, but certainly many groups, Mal's, Liberty Victoria, other groups, have expressed concern about that charge being used. I understand it was previously used in relation to the Max Brenner protest that took place and was successfully challenged in the Magistrates' Court. So I'm not sure. Perhaps police will rely on the extraordinary nature of COVID-19 times to say that this is a different type of case, but it may well be that they suffer another defeat if the charge is indeed contested. But it's a bizarre thing for certainly what I don't want to speak on behalf of Mal's, but certainly personally I don't understand why you would lay that charge to someone in that situation. It certainly seems like an inappropriate police response. And it will be really interesting to see how it plays out in court. And certainly that's one of the things I'll be asking our presenters on Thursday.
Absolutely. And as Chris said at the end of the interview, previous to you, this could set a very dangerous precedent. Absolutely.
I mean, I can think of so many situations where just a very harmless conversation or an online interaction would satisfy the elements of incitement. It's such a vague and nebulous charge. It's almost like a pre-crime. And it's the offence sort of comes into effect because I suppose governments are so worried about terrorist offences and bombings and that sort of activity where people are going out of their way to cause huge amounts of harm to other members of the community. But that's it's really black and white in terms of the situation that Chris is in, where he's going out of his way to express care and concern and compassion to other members of the community who have in extremely difficult circumstances.
Without wishing to speculate, I mean, this incitement charge appears to have absolutely nothing to do with the public health regulations, and it appears that there's an interesting parallel to the Patriot Act in America, where a lot of those charges were laid in a different guise, of course, but looking at, this guilty by association and pitting people against each other.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really got a chilling effect on community groups who might want to organise and do these things, and I'm reluctant to speculate too, but you sort of think, well, that's the intent, this sort of general deterrent to people, who might be thinking about doing the same sort of thing. And you sort of think, well, that's got to be part of the calculation in not only having laws like that, but also charging people with those offences. So it's interesting to see, I suppose, how not only at those events are people policed, but also sort of general approach to discouraging those sorts of events and creating a social environment where people do feel like they can't go and do that sort of thing, or can't take to the streets, or can't organise some sort of community event to get across a concern about a particular issue or wanting to express sort of care to a marginalised group.
That's exactly right.
There's an interesting project by the Flemington Kensington Community Legal Centre looking at sort of COVID-19 policing and sort of those that fact of sort of police repression of that sort of activity and mapping the different repression that takes place in particular communities in terms of how those activities are discouraged or policed. So certainly if listeners wish to sort of follow up on that, there's a website, COVID-19 Policing. It's covidpolicing.org.au. And that's
this is where people report what happens to them when they're fined?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of fed into particular community legal centres so that we can get a clearer picture, because Victoria has been really slow in releasing details about who's been issued infringements and why. But sadly, we've seen same sort of trends as you see in lots of social issues play out, particularly we know what happened in New South Wales because the data was released there, but we saw a high rate of infection in sort of, at least early on, in wealthier suburbs towards the east, but then the majority of infringements were issued in poorer western suburbs, which have been, traditionally over-policed. And I suspect we would have seen the same trend in Victoria, but we just don't have that data to be able to say. But certainly what that would suggest is that police are sort of going out there and targeting groups that they think they can discourage from particular activity, or at least, I suppose, really using a lot more of the stick rather than the carrot in trying to influence people's behaviour depending on where they fall in terms of socio-economic strata and how empowered they are as particular groups.
Yes, and by the same token, no one is suggesting that the pandemic isn't real. We know that we have to be safe, and we know that there do need to be public health measures put in place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not what's being said at all, is it?
No, I was made aware, funnily enough, that there's a sovereign citizens Bible called Know Your Rights, which we have. We don't have anything to do with the sovereign citizens movement, and personally, I've seen some very concerning videos where people are just refusing to wear masks and having sort of disregard to other people's health and well-being because they feel like the state is oppressing them. And, for the most part, it looks like those sorts of interactions speak to someone's privilege of not having previously had to deal with any sort of, I suppose, enforcement of regulations. But, yeah, MELS has nothing to do with that sort of sovereign citizens approach. The pandemic is real. It's important that the government organise a response that keeps us all safe, and, it's encouraging to see that that's happening to some degree. But it is strange to see people out there in the community asserting that their human rights are being infringed when all they're being asked to do is take some simple measures to reduce the risk they pose to other members of the community.
And yet anti-lockdown protests are allowed to happen.
Yes, it is really interesting to see the disparity in the response, particularly in the media as well. People have tried to frame the Herald Sun tried to frame the Black Lives Matter protest as the origin of the second wave outbreaks.
Yeah.
And what the Chief Health Officer has said is that's categorically untrue. But I've not once seen that sort of narrative in the media about the anti-lockdown protests that have continued to be ongoing in the community. So you really sort of see, I suppose, some political angle that sort of plays out in the narratives that we see about this in the media. But Mal's certainly wasn't present. We haven't been present at any of the anti-lockdown events. I doubt we'd be invited, and certainly, certainly we also, I suppose, would have significant concerns about attending events where it's hard to see any, I suppose, harm being done to members of the community. It's hard to see any marginalised groups who've been affected. It's hard to see any political space that's being unfairly restricted. But it is an interesting time politically, where we're sort of relying on the government to take care of us, but still asking it to do that in a compassionate and fair way that doesn't result in, I suppose, over-policing or police violence directed to vulnerable members of the community.
Absolutely, and I believe there's also a second event that Mel's is organising called Defending Protest, and that's on the 11th of September, Friday 1 till 2. Is that right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I've had a little less to do with that, but we've got a really... so the first event is called A Right to Protest. So that's this Thursday at 1 p.m. on August the 27th. And then we've also got a second event that will be hosted by a colleague of mine, Jennifer Keane-McCann. She's done a lot of great work organising this, and I understand you may be able to have her
yes, she's coming on this Monday coming up.
Fantastic. I can also confirm, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this on air, but Michael Stanton, one of the speakers this Thursday, he'll also be available to speak on your show next Monday.
Oh, how wonderful.
So he can probably say some more intelligent things about the current legal situation than I have today. But, he's got a really interesting background in terms of working in the law sort of day in, day out. So he has some really great insights in relation to how unusual the present situation is. But the Defending Protest discussion, that's on Friday the 11th of September. We have Dr. Nicole Rogers, Felicity Jerry, QC, who's another barrister who I suppose she wouldn't mind being described as an activist as well, but she's certainly on the board of Liberty Victoria. She's very active in terms of political issues. So that's a discussion, I suppose, about organising protests. One thing that's come up that's very interesting in the context of climate change and groups such as Extinction Rebellion is the possibility or viability of a necessity defence in relation to charges that people are facing. So with the Spring Rebellion, we saw lots of members of Extinction Rebellion being charged with fairly minor offences, obstructing roadways and things like that. And I understand that members of that group may well end up in the court running what's described as a necessity defence, saying that kind of action, shutting down roadways, making people aware of the ecological crisis, is something that's necessary to, I suppose, the continued existence of the community or humans on a planet that supports them environmentally. And so that's going to be a really fascinating discussion, particularly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming onto the program, Tom. It's been really great having you. Do you have any final comments that you want
really.
to make?
I I just encourage anyone who's interested in what the Melbourne Activist Legal Support Group do to seek us out online. They're certainly welcome to come along to a monthly meeting, or there's a real wealth of resources on our website. So I'd certainly encourage people to seek that out. And the report on the public housing that was published on July 16th gives a really clear and sort of independent account of what was seen there, and I haven't really seen that level of detail in any other account of what happened in terms of that hard lockdown. So I'd encourage people to have a look at that if they're interested in knowing what we do as a group.
That's great. So just for listeners, for this Thursday, the 27th of August from 1 till 2, and what's that first event entitled again?
It's called A Right to Protest, and it's a Law Week panel. Yes, and we're featuring Michael Stanton, Maria O'Sullivan, and your earlier guest, Chris Breen. Lovely.
Thanks so much for your time, Tom, and I look forward to joining the event on Thursday and listening to what's going on. It's
wonderful.
Approximately 4:50. Sorry?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's approximately 4:55, and you're listening to an interview with Tom Battersea.
You're listening to 3CR Community Radio 855 AM. Visit the 3CR website at 3cr.org.au/podcast to hear the most recent recording from each show, or 3cr.org.au/streaming to listen live.
And you're back with the Doing Time show. It's approximately 4:56. We've got about a minute left of our show. Thanks so much to Tom and Chris for coming on, and see if you can rock up to these online events on Thursday the 27th of August and also the 11th of September. And stay tuned every Monday from 4 to 5 p.m. for the Doing Time show. And Beyond Zero is up next. We'll be going out with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella, from the Rumpy Band. And stay tuned for this Monday in particular as we continue our discussion in regards to the right to protest and interviewing a number of lawyers. Thanks so much and take care, everybody. Stay safe.
As long as you a true fella, as long as you a real fella.